Hi everyone, welcome back to Crafting with Slavie. The card I'm here to show you today was a birthday card I made for my mom. If you saw my last video, I mentioned that card that I made there wasn't quite extra enough for her. So I decided to make this photo collage pop-up card for her instead, using Karen Burniston's photo collage pop-up die set. And I am putting mustard seed here on my cardstock card base, and I've just indicated for myself where I'm going to be gluing pieces down so that I don't have to ink blend over top of them, and that I fold it appropriately so that the ink blending is seamless. So like I mentioned, that was mustard seed, and then because I was being lazy and I didn't want to take out multiple blending brushes, as I am working with 6 different colors, I just kept using the same brush, and in between each color that I used, I ink blended these 3 pieces of each the backing and the photo matte frame, I guess, to put on my finished project so that I wouldn't have to switch between brushes, like I said. It ended up working out really well. I did have to use a second brush because I ended up needing to ink blend something in this light mustard seed color, but that's okay. So the finished card measures 6.5 by 5. And I used a pre-made card for this that I bought at Michael's in a 50 pack. So I'm not even really sure. I did not link it down below. You can make it, of course, yourself, or you can pick it up, whatever works best for you. Here I am going in with Wild Honey, and you can see that I've marked my paper where I'm going to be gluing it down, and that's so that I can have those nice transitions, and also so I don't confuse myself later, because, you know, that's a thing. So to make my card base, you'll see that it kind of looks a little bit weird. I took my 6.5 by 5 card base, which I believe was 6.5 by 10 with a score line down the middle, and I scored it at 1.5. Oh, pardon me. I actually cut off a 1/2 inch off of one side. And just to go back to the card here for a second, here I am going in with carved pumpkin. So I cut off a 1/2 inch on one side, and on that same side from the middle score line, I scored at 1.5 and 3 inches, which gave me those 3 panels. And I scored on both sides so that I would be able to fold it like this, and I would be able to have nice clean folds. Here I am going in with dried marigold. And that ended up working out really well. And that's because I wanted to do an acetate front window. I was inspired by Karen Burniston. She did a version of this photo collage pop-up card with the acetate window, and it just looked fabulous. So I wanted to recreate that card here. Now I'm going in with, pardon me, this is dried marigold. So before that it was carved pumpkin still. And I really was trying to stretch my distressings here. I have every distressing color. I wanted to try them all out and see how I like them, and I figured once I've tested them all, I could go and get the distress oxides and then just get reinkers for the distress ink. Here I am going in with spiced marmalade, and I realized that I am not using a lot of the colors, so I didn't want them to go to waste. I wanted to stretch my creativity and stretch my supplies a little bit more. So I picked out these 6 colors and just kind of rolled with it. And I ended up really loving the result. Here I am with ripe persimmon. I ended up loving the result. It created this beautiful color combination, and I just thought it would be perfect if you're making like a bee card, or anything really. The sky's the limit here. And I just loved it so much. I tend to gravitate towards the pinks and the purples and the blues, and I mean, I have my grass colors picked out and that's all fine and dandy, but it was nice to play with some other colors that I hadn't played with before. So this is the mechanism for the actual pop-up portion of the card. I am going in with mustard seed, but you'll notice that the color is a little bit weird. Here I am going in with wild honey just to add a little bit more texture. I had some excess ink left over on my brush. It's the same brush that I used before, but that's okay. I didn't actually mind that. I liked that distressed look, for lack of a better word. And here's where I had to reach for a new brush because I really wanted these die cuts, which came from the same set, to be yellow. And I didn't want to have any other ink color on my brush, so I just reached for another brush that's a little bit smaller and ink blended these guys just on the one side. And then when I had my pictures printed, I printed a few that were a little bit bigger than what my photo mats would hold. And I am a huge fan of Kathy Orda, so I love making photo mats. So here I am blending out my photo mats, and I did them front and back because I wasn't sure at this point how I would adhere them to the card, if they would be popping through the acetate and you'd be able to see them on the back, or what was going to happen. I played around with maybe doing a pocket and tucking them in. And then I realized when I was ink blending those that I have 18 photo mats to put on this mechanism. And even though I'm using 100-pound cardstock, it was getting pretty obvious that it just wasn't gonna be enough. So I cut out 4 more arms to reinforce my cardstock. And then as I was ink blending them, I decided that I was going to do the back of these as well, just to give me that flexibility. And I realized that because of the acetate, you're going to be able to see it through the acetate window. So I ink blended the same on the back as I did on the front, which is to say mustard seed, and then a little bit of wild honey. I didn't care about getting like really great coverage. I just wanted to make sure that that color was on there and that it looked kind of worn and distressed, if you will, just to give it that really nice textured look. And finally, I went in with the dried marigold to do my sentiment. Now the sentiment is linked below. It's the Tim Holtz Sizzix, I think, celebration words. Anyway, they're linked below. I just love the script on this. So I cut out 2 of them and I ink blended them front and back just in the single color. And I knew that I wanted to put them somewhere on the acetate, which is why I blended them front and back. I just wasn't sure if I was going to have a photo mat behind them or what I was going to do with them. So here's all of my pieces. And first things first, I glued down the glue only portion. And you'll kind of see why I folded it this way in just a moment. It's going to be readily apparent. And because it's a heavier cardstock, I used a heavy block to hold it down together. And then I started assembling my photo mats. So to keep things simple, I just used the same color for front and back. Just because I didn't want to have to worry about, oh, did I use this one enough? And blah, blah, blah. And my head would just go spinning, and that's not good. So same color, front and back. And this took a little bit of time. It's all right. Then I went back to my card base. So at this point it had dried sufficiently that I could go ahead and adhere the acetate. And I did that here. And you can see, oh, I lined it up nice and pretty, but you can see where the glue comes through on the acetate. So even though it's been pressed down, you can still see the glue marks. And that's why we have this piece of paper that's been a glue on top of that so that it hides it really nicely. And as an added bonus, you can't even really tell there's acetate there. So here I am finishing up my photo mats. And this is where I made a bit of a boo-boo in that I just got so excited, I just carried on. So I'm training my folds here and I'm slowly but surely realizing that this piece is still really wet with ink. So make sure that if you're going to do this much ink blending, you're doing this like as a 2-day process is my recommendation. I tried heat setting it with my heat gun. But honestly, it needed to dry. So I let it dry overnight. And really, the reason why is coming up real quick. So I trained all the folds there as per Karen Burniston's video, which I've linked for you below on the assembly. It's pretty easy, but just in case. And I adhered it to my panel. And from there, I thought that I had let it dry enough that I could kind of play around with it. So I played around with the folds, made sure the mechanism worked okay. Then I tried to put it together and it just came off. And do you see what it did to that paper? It just lifted in all the worst ways. So I put a heavy block on it, called it a night, came back the next day, and started over. So at this point, it was nice and adhered, everything was dry, and I started going again. So here I go with my arms. And like I said, because I had 18 photos printed, these little guys, I double stacked the arms. So I put one on the front and on the back. And while you watch me do that, I'll tell you a little bit about how I got my photos printed. So I am a scrapbooker, and as such, I really love incorporating photos that are not just 4x6 into my scrapbooking projects. And this pop-up die set really lends itself to that. The pictures end up being, I think it's about a 1 1/4, 1 1/8 square photos. And to get them printed, what I did is I downloaded a free Collage app. I made sure that there was no monthly fees or anything like that. And with a lot of them, what you can do is set your photo to be a 4x6 and then add 6 photos. And then you can kind of play around with the zoom and make sure it's centered, whatever else, and then save them individually. And then those saved 4x6 photos is what I had printed. And then when I came home with them, in this case, I used the actual die to cut the photos out because the die lends itself to that. However, if you are using it for a scrapbook project or for any other kind of project, you can absolutely just use your paper trimmer to cut these photos out. And then you have these cute little photos. And you can, of course, do this with different sizes. You can do 2 3x4s on the same print, etc. Whatever works for you, but it creates a lot of really nice interest in your paper projects if you're incorporating photos, because then they're not just these huge 4x6 photos. And of course, when you're working with an A2 size card, you still have to trim it down to even get it to fit the card. So I've just always been a fan of cutting them down like that. And then here I am adhering my happy birthday. And I kind of played around with where I wanted to place it. I thought maybe I would want it on a photo mat and, strategically adhere it so that you would only see the glue marks on, or that you wouldn't see the glue marks. It would just be the happy birthday. And then I ultimately ended up deciding that I just wanted the happy birthday on the actual acetate, and I would put the photo mats on the card. So here I am adhering the happy birthday. And when you are gluing something onto acetate, it makes a god-awful mess, especially if you're sliding it around like I did here for the happy birthday, the birthday specifically. So I have a quick stick tool, and it has this attachment on the back, and it's just a plastic one. It comes with a pick and then kind of like a paddle thing. And I use the pick to remove the larger amounts of glue that I had kind of splotched everywhere. And it worked really well. It didn't scratch the acetate or anything, so I was able to keep going. And then because you can see the glue marks through the back and it kind of looks a little weird, I took that other happy birthday and I adhered it to the back of the acetate as well so that you would just see paper. And I just really like that look, because then you can't really tell. I mean, obviously it was glued on with something, but you can't really tell what the adhesive was, and it works really nicely. So I tried two different methods. I tried putting the glue onto the acetate and then putting the die cut on. And then I also tried taking the die cut, putting the glue on it and putting it on the acetate. And just know it's going to be messy. There's no real great way to do it. I feel like you're going to get glue everywhere regardless. So the only other thing I could suggest is if you have a Xyron, which I do not, and you're able to make these into a sticker, that might be the easiest way to not make a god-awful mess. But you know, for those of us who can't afford a Xyron machine, here we are. Or, better yet, since we're all COVIDed, I can't even find one to purchase. So, you know, make the best with what we got, right? Okay, so then once I adhered those, I'm going to start building my card. And my recommendation for you here is make sure you follow the image on the front of the packaging of the photo collage pop-up. You'll see that I adhered that first picture on the top towards the right and the bottom one towards the left. And that just helps everything slide around a little bit better. If you do it the other way, you're risking creating more catch points. And with catch points, the mechanism just doesn't function very well. And with this pop-up card specifically, every time I adhered a photo mat, I closed it and checked to make sure everything worked. So like that one there, I had to reposition it because it was sticking out. So if you wanted to put it into a card, like if you were mailing it out, you wouldn't be able to. You'd have to cut off a part of the photomat, and nobody wants that. So just, you know, don't do that. Check it after every one. And because I'm using wet glue, I had the ability to remove the photomats if there wasn't if they didn't quite fit, and I could just kind of rub off the adhesive and it was fine. And then back there, you saw me adhering a photomat to the back of that little cluster, because when you close the card, all you could see was this back of photomats and there was nothing there. So the nice thing about using the acetate front is you can actually kind of put in little Easter eggs like that where you can only see it if it's closed. So I did that there, but I created a bit of a catch point. So I will show you how to fix that in just a moment. Right now I am adhering the rest of my photomats, and because they're so big, I kind of put them along the back and on the inside, wherever I had that extra large paper. It ended up working out really well. And I have to say, I was a little bit worried at this point because there was just so much orange and you couldn't really see the ink blending, and I was worried that it was just going to be overwhelmingly orange. But I have to say, after I added the photos, it looked beautiful. So I was quite happy with the result. And here I am ink blending a piece that came out from the middle of the front of the photomat thing there. And I hadn't thrown them out yet. So I had one at my disposal. I blended it with white persimmon, and then I adhered it to the back of those photomats there, and it helped fix my catch point so that it wouldn't catch anymore. So that's a really quick and easy way that you can fix it. You just got to get a little bit creative. And then I had two photomats left, so I wanted to put them on the front of the card on the actual acetate. So I put one there so you could still see it. And then I put one on the front right over top of it so that it would hide the glue marks. Now, the only other thing that I have to mention is that whenever I was adhering these photomats, I made sure that I didn't put any glue on the white parts because I needed to still put my photos in there. So by not putting any glue on the white parts, I made sure that I was able to get my photos in there and just slide them in underneath those others. It ended up working out really well. And here I'm adhering my little smile cutout pieces, and here's the finished card. So everything's adhered. I'm ready to put my photos on. And here's a nice close-up of what it looks like with all those little smiles on there. and our catch point is mostly fixed. And I'm okay with that. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.